hold on, let me check my notes. If there's any additional tree removal, and the environmental impact would be really irreparable. Some of those trees have been there just by the roots. If you take a look at some of my pictures from the other project, they're 30, 40 feet high. So no planting of any landscape of any kind can suck up the amount of water that these trees currently that are still standing, what they're able to do. Some of the proposed landscaping in their projects, when I foiled, they don't do well in waterlogged areas. Also, just in general, like, it's just the amount of increase with noise, traffic, things like that. The air quality issue, like I said, the animals, the local decor, the increased traffic of Route 59. Some of the traffic studies were not really specific. It said that yes, it would only create traffic going in and out certain different ways, but the placement of those devices weren't exactly the best. So maybe it would be worthwhile of maybe getting another company to come in, not just have a skewed sampling, I guess you could say, of the traffic. And when it was actually not during the time that they had mentioned prior. It was not exactly when the highest amount of usage was. Thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Gentleman in the back, please.
Jeff Beatty, 21 Stage. Yes.
State
I
your
agree.
name and affirm.
I do.
What is your name?
Jeff Beatty, 21
Do
Stage.
what? Affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be
Yes, sir.
the truth?
Yes.
All right.
So, with traffic studies, it took me 10 minutes today at 1:30 to get out of Stage Street on the Route 59. 10 minutes to get on the Route 59, which is absurd. Right? So I don't know what traffic study is being done, but you can't get out of any of those roads up there. Okay, that was a 1:30 this afternoon. Second is my safety and security concerns. Still with stuff being put in this warehouse with no security on premise. That's a big concern of mine, and I'm sure of the Lackawanna residents as well. That's all. So.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Well, there being no further, oh, ma'am, right there.
Barbara Ruggiero,
Where do you live?
16 State Street. I have to think about that. 16 State Street.
You affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge.
Yes, I do. I just wanted to ask a question. If this was to go through, we talked about last week about we have well water, and we want to know where we're going to get the water from. Now, does that mean, because if you have another big plant like this, our water's just gone. It's gone. I mean, we don't have enough soil to zap it all up. So, what do we do about that?
We all have water with wells.
We all have wells. So, anything that goes on the property is stuff that we're going to be drinking. And my husband had already taken our well and had to clean it. They had to Clorox it, actually, because it was so polluted. Now, these are only from these few houses. Or maybe it's from, the gardens and stuff like that. But if we have a building, now what are we going to do for water? It's not going to be drinking water there for us. So I just wanted to propose that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Going once? Twice?
I see one more thing. If you
Just say your name again, please.
Jeff Beatty, 21
Yeah,
Stage.
go ahead.
All right. I hate how they keep throwing LO zone in our face. LO zone, there's residents there, but this is an LO zone. There's variance, but this is an LO zone. There are residents there, guy, okay? All of us, most of us here are residents of that area. So whatever you're going to put there is going to impact all of us. So when you keep throwing your LO zone out, just remember that in the back of your head.
Okay.
That's all I got to say.
Do you have a comment, sir, in the green sweater?
Yeah, Silver
Just state your name again.
Richie O'Neill, 31 Lackawanna.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess the comments have been going back and forth for the last 3 or 4 months on this project. And, as you're well aware, or as everyone here is well aware, it's been opposition by the community. So, hopefully you'll take that into account when you make your decisions.
Thank you very much. Ma'am?
I just have a question, if you mind.
State your
Corinne
name once
Cohen,
again, please, for the record.
Corinne Cohen, 53 Lackawanna.
Thank you.
This board will make a decision today just on the variances at this point. It will go back to the planning board for further decision.
Well, we don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight, but
Well,
by
yeah,
the way,
okay. I
I
understood.
couldn't tell you what is gonna proceed the next, minutes, an hour, or whatever.
But after your decision, it's
yeah,
still
let me-
open at the planning board.
Mr. Attorney, please.
So my son could be in grade
Depending on what happens either tonight or another night
Right.
from this board, will dictate what, if anything, is the next step in the process. If the board were to approve the variances, approve with modifications, whatever the case may be, it would then go back to the planning board for site plan approval.
Okay.
Many of the issues that I heard you speak about in particular, but other people have also spoken about, are site plan related issues that are the purview of the planning board. If the board were to deny the variances, the applicant would have the ability to challenge that denial in court, and it would be a different process.
Thank you. I just needed that clarification. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing, if you will.
Tonight? We have a second. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Francesco?
Yes.
Mr. Piccarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Chairman Cavell?
Yes.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
say what you will, say what you like.
Just before, I just want to, I know the board was showing some pictures, especially from the Indian Rock, from looking down from 59. I have pictures here to show what it looks like from Indian Rock, looking up at the property 124, just so the board can see that. There is plenty of opportunity for buffering. That's the rock wall that the neighbors were concerned about, and that we're not touching, by the way. We're not going to disturb the rock wall. They have sheds right in front of that rock wall. The property is above it, 124.
Mr. Brown, just for clarification, the sheds are at the end of the property that you're indicating?
These sheds,
I see the rock
yeah,
wall
are up
behind
against
it.
the rock wall, and then our property is up here.
And do you have a distance that you're showing this property going back? Do you have an idea? It's hard to tell from a picture because these
Yeah.
are up front. Is this 15 feet back, 20 feet to this?
I don't know, maybe Mr. Turco can...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's hard to say what's there. We don't know how far back we're looking.
I understand. Maybe Mr. Turco can clarify that.
Yeah, just because,
Oh, no, I was just going to show him.
well, I'm saying it's
Okay, so this is the back, this is our property line here. This is just on the back of the property line right here. The sheds are on the property line. In the back. That's the back.
That's the back, right?
That's the back of our property. So you were at the end of our property taking pictures of that's the rock wall on top. I have the same picture, it's up there. Okay.
All right,
Let's move on.
let's keep moving, Mr.
So listen,
Brown.
let me sum up. I mean, you had people complain about wetlands. There are no wetlands on this property, and even if there were, wetlands is something that's going to be dealt with by the planning board. If it's a DEC regulated wetland, or a New York State regulated wetland, or a villages regulated wetland, we're going to need permits either from the Army Corps for the DEC or from the planning board to disturb the buffer, to disturb the wetlands. No wetlands are going to be disturbed. There will be some disturbance in the buffer, but that's the other application. That's not this application, and that's not even an issue before your board. Your planning board has got planners, they have engineers. The engineers are well versed in drainage, in wetlands, in landscaping, the types of landscaping, what impacts are going to be, detected as part of the environmental review. They're going to go through SECRA. There's going to be studies. Everything that you've heard tonight, I understand their concerns, but it's all speculation. It's all speculation right now. Nobody can say what impacts they're going to suffer to their wells, to their wetlands, mosquitoes. Rockland County has a mosquito control. They have a mosquito control law. We have to comply with that. We need a permit from Rockland County Health Department. So all these things are looked at the planning board level. I just don't want the board to get bogged down in speculation from neighbors because they're concerned about a project being built in an LO zone that's appropriate for the zone. I know Ms. Peavy said it's a residential district. It's not a residential district. It's an LO district. It's a laboratory office district. This is the proper use for this area. Your code says so. Your master plan says so. So to say it's a residential district and it doesn't belong is totally off base. And I think, and I did my research, and I didn't bring it up because I'm not 100% sure because the village's records were a little bit less than clear, but the last house at the end of Stage Road, Stage Street, received the use variance, I think back in 1999, to allow the construction of a single-family house in an LO zone. I think it might be the Peavy's house, I'm not sure, but you need to know that. They got a variance to build a house in an LO zone so they can complain about the impacts from an LO zone business. And I think the board has to take that into consideration. It's almost like moving to the nuisance. You can't move to an area and then complain about the uses that are in that area. Again, I don't want the board to get bogged down in speculation. As Mr. Kraushaar pointed out, the planning board is eminently capable of dealing with site plan issues, wetland issues, drainage issues, tree removal, impacts on wells, and traffic. There's traffic studies. You have traffic engineers. These people are trained. They're learned. They're certified in their fields. They know. Okay? Right now, all you're dealing with is speculation. And for this board to make a decision based upon speculation is totally inappropriate. So I submit to you that there's been nothing concrete, no evidential information submitted to you to indicate any of these impacts are going to happen. And that's for the planning board to look at. And if the planning board determines these impacts are going to happen, then they're going to deny it. But we're not there yet. We have to get past you. So we're looking at the variances. And going through these variances, as I indicated in my supplemental narrative, all the potential impacts that have been identified these are impacts that are going to be created by the development of the property for a use that's permitted in the zone. They're not necessarily created by a granting of the variance. There's a few issues that legitimately were brought up regarding potential impacts from noise and light, and maybe a visual impact from seeing these buildings back there. But again, that's something that could be mitigated by appropriate conditions. And Mr. Churko has indicated, and he's shown you the landscape plan, that he's going to heavily landscape this property. And if your board wants to look at all the landscaping, we'll come back and we'll show you and we'll give you a landscaping plan. If you want the planning board to do it, we'll show it to the planning board. But I know the planning board, and they're going to require a good landscape plan.
Can I ask a question on that, Mr. Turco? What height are those trees that are showing there as the buffer? They look to me like fully grown 20-year-old trees.
But just so you know, I went today and I took some pictures, okay? And I made sure that I had my designer put these trees in, okay, because this is what's there now. They're very tall trees.
So you're not adding these, you're saying this is what it says. That's what I'm
they're going to
confused.
screen the houses. These are existing trees. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of trees there.
Mr. Turco,
You
just
mean-
clarification. You're showing a picture of what's there, not what you're planning to do.
This is this back here is existing. This here is the screening that we're gonna be doing.
The lower.
Well, they're gonna be
Well,
Norways, they're conifers, they're gonna grow very big, but this is all here already, and this is all here already. So when you look at this property, this is kinda what it looks like right now. The whole thing is wooded, and we're talking about 20,000.
They're all mostly deciduous trees,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and so when they grow in the summer, they're not gonna see it. It's
Can
gonna
we see
fill
the
in.
pictures?
Yeah, but there's also,
Can I-
Can we see the
November.
pictures?
Can I just say
No,
one
no,
thing?
no,
I'm sorry.
please.
Can you see the picture?
But some of those trees are not in good
We
condition.
can't just pop in and speak, we have
I'm
to
sorry.
have
So
some
what-
order, but I may recognize you in a bit, but.
What I wanna
Please, let the-
what I wanna try to clarify is I'm not trying to sell this so everyone just agrees with me. I've been doing this for a very long time.
Those are deciduous
They're
trees,
deciduous existing
and they
trees that
drop
are
their
there
leaves
in the winter.
in November, December, January, February, March, and possibly into April, so it's a
So-
good part of the year.
Right, so when these grow in,
Yeah.
okay, you're really not gonna see, because first of all, these warehouses we're putting in aren't gonna be 35 feet.
All right.
These are gonna be no more than maybe 16 or 18 feet. These are not gonna be big units, it's a very small piece of property, okay? So we're gonna make it work, that's why we did the study, we spoke to the traffic people, we spoke to the fire department. So at the end of the day, the impact, I really truly believe, from your property, because I went there today myself, and I walked through the entire property. Okay, and I wanted to make sure that when I presented this to you, it was my belief from from a professional standpoint, that it's really heavily wooded. It's all woods back there. And the piece of property that we're developing is only 20,000 square feet. So we're hearing these major impacts that this small little piece of property is going to have on Route 59. And it's really, in my mind, it's a really small piece of property.
Let me ask you something, what is the intent, maybe I wasn't here last month, what is the business intent of this warehousing?
We're gonna be renting these to small contractors.
Please in the back,
We're
please.
gonna be renting these to small contractors, carpenters that have a pickup truck, maybe a plumber that has a small plumbing business, or maybe someone that has like a small mail order company or Amazon that orders boxes. This is not gonna be a heavily, just a small piece of property. We wanna try to utilize the property. We've been sitting there for so many years, and we designed this because of what the zone is. This is why we designed this. We designed this based on the zone. We didn't design this based on because I came up with this idea to do warehouse. I'd like to try to develop the property that I've had for 20 years. That's really what it comes down to. And I do want to clarify one thing. When I built Boulders, I wasn't the plumber there. I had nothing to do with the plumbing. I did the landscaping.
For the record.
For the record, I did because I take a lot of pride in what I do.
I appreciate
Okay,
it.
and that's who I am, and I really do. So I did all the landscaping there, the drainage, the earthwork. I did the field. I did the baseball field. I didn't build the building there. I built all the buildings in Montebello, in my mansion. I did all the site work there. I did all the drainage there. I built the roads there, and I built the homes. And then I also sold the homes, just for the record. Thank you.
Okay, so let me continue. The variances that we're seeking are not going to create the impacts that people are complaining about. It's the use of the property for use that's permitted in this zone. So when you go through your factors, an undesirable change created in the character of the neighborhood, as I indicated to you, I don't think this is an undesirable change. I think there are many other properties that are similarly situated that are deficient with regard to their bulk requirements, whether it be front setback, side setback, lot width, that we're not out of character with the neighborhood. And there's no other way this property can be developed for a use permitted in the zone without the granting of the variance. So there's no other feasible alternative for this applicant to pursue.
Mr. Brown, didn't we see at the last meeting an approval back in 2006 with less variances for Mr. Turco to develop this lot?
Not on this lot.
Yes,
Yes,
I thought we did.
Yes.
Because we didn't even get to this. All we talked about was 130 at the last meeting.
No, but I think when we
124.
looked at, if I'm
It's
correct.
part of, I think it was part of the, he had
The zoning
provided-
analysis.
The zoning analysis that you gave.
Are you asking,
Yes.
are you
So-
asking if it was approved?
No, I know we had approved certain variances.
It was 124.
For 124,
124,
you granted
for you
variances
to-
in 2006.
Let me just, no, I understand this. Your comments that this is the only project, there was another smaller project with different variances that had been approved.
Yes.
Right.
The question I didn't get to ask you last time is why didn't you build that one?
Well, there was some issues with my partner, and he got into a divorce, so we didn't build the property.
Okay. And this project, we didn't have the plans, was smaller than the project we're projecting today.
Yep, the project, this is at roughly 6,000 square feet total. The other project was a 2,700 square foot office and 1,200 square feet of warehouse.
And as far as the coverage on the lot,
Almost double the size.
But the difference is that the office the parking was a problem there. So that's the reason why we didn't go back to the office. And that just requires less parking, and this is gonna have less of an impact. Because the 2,700 square foot office building, it really made it very difficult, because it wasn't gonna work with the handicapped access, even though you got it approved, but it was a much more difficult project to develop. And you needed a tremendous amount more parking, and it really wouldn't have worked. Here, we're talking about having maybe three tenants that in the whole place. So we're trying to make the property, we want to utilize the property, and we want it to be underutilized and overutilized.
and I apologize, this has been going on too long and I'm getting old to remember all the facts. How many warehouse spaces are being on the plan?
There's six doors, but there's probably only gonna be maybe 2 or 3 tenants.
Well, there's 6 doors, 6,000 square feet, right?
Yeah.
So each door basically has a 1,000-foot bay?
Yeah, but the thing too is they may even be less doors based on if we get a tenant that wants a bigger space, then there'll be less doors. This is the way the intent is. So the doors are kind of irrelevant because it may only have 2 doors.
I'm just trying to
Yes.
picture.
They're 1,000 square feet.
They're basically 1,000-foot bay, and you're looking at 6 bays currently that may be put together to be 3 bays of 2,000 each, but that's what you're looking at.
In theory, right now, these are going to be, in my mind, we're gonna have 3 tenants that are gonna be 2,000 square feet each. That's kind of what we're gonna rent. That's gonna be the market that we're gonna be. We're not gonna rent to small guys, and that's not a lot of square feet because we did some analysis, and that's what rents. So usually it's 2,500 is the average that rents. So it's gonna be 3 tenants, 2,000 square feet each.
No, they're not gonna rent small guys.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
Okay.
Just a clarification.
May I continue, Mr. Chairman?
Please?
Okay. So, as I indicated, there's no way to feasibly develop this property without the grant of the variance. Mr. Francesco, I know you said we had another project approved, but that project received numerous variances in order to be developed. So, it's not like it was something that could be developed as of right without variances.
How many variances were granted on that one? Do you know?
I don't know. Let's go forward, not backwards. The requested variances, are they substantial? Well, yeah, many of them are substantial. Some of them are 0. But you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. You have to look at the totality of everything in performing your balancing test. And even though some of these things are significant, as we've indicated, the zoning analysis shows there are many parcels that are also deficient, and they also had significant variances granted. And and this is not that dissimilar from what exists in the LO zone. The variances will not have an impact on the physical environmental condition of the property. These variances are type 2 actions under SECRA, means they're deemed not to have any impact, and no SECRA analysis needs to be done for the variances themselves. For the development, by the planning board, yes, but for the variances, as a type 2, you don't have to. And then finally, was the alleged difficulty self-created? And we've talked about that. We indicate that the intent was for him to purchase all 3 of these lots and to assemble them all and to build a big project, and the 126 got taken out from under him through the bankruptcy courts, and now they're stuck with these 2 parcels and an island of a house in between, and we're trying to come up with the best project that we can, keeping in with the zone and permitted uses in the zone. So I would say that the alleged difficulty was not self-created, but if you find it was self-created, again, it's only a factor for you to look at in your deliberations, and it's not a final determination for the grant of the variances. And the last thing I want to point out to the board is, you know, the Rockland County Department of Planning issued a disapproval letter as part of their GML review. And so we're asking you to override that disapproval letter. And the reason why the county shouldn't even be doing this at all is they are not entrusted with the same legal obligations as a zoning board is to look at the factors and to weigh the appropriate factors and make a determination based upon the law. They can say deny them, but they don't have to support that to a court. It's not their job to look at the factors. It's your job to do that. So they can't tell you, excuse me, Dan, they can't tell you deny a project when if you look at the law and you look at the factors and an applicant is entitled to relief just because the Rockland County Department of Planning says we disapprove it, doesn't mean that the project is dead. You're the board that's entrusted with the power to grant variances. You have criteria you have to look at, and if those criteria say that we're entitled to a variance, we're entitled to a variance regardless of what the county has said regarding their comment, you should disapprove it. So we would ask that you override the GML, look at all the factors, and grant the applicant the variances requested. And if the board wants to, try and impose appropriate conditions that are reasonably related to any potential impacts that are going to be created by the grant of the variance, we're more than willing to, discuss that with the board and try to come to some sort of resolution so that this project can be built.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan, can we move on at a certain point to,
I'd like to,
wait, let me finish my sentence.
okay.
Ask and move on to number 6, 130, Route 59 at a certain point, because there are questions that the board members might want to ask as well. It's on our agenda. Hold on. Public hearing has been closed on that.
Yeah, the public hearing is closed on both.
So when can I proceed to move on and ask questions regarding the other application?
When we get to the other application?
Well, I'm just saying, at what point? I mean, you can say your piece, and I'll proceed to open it up to the board.
I guess it comes down to which order you want to take the consideration on first, either 124 or 130.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make closing remarks on 130 before the board goes into deliberation.
Go ahead.
So if you're ready to move on to that application,
I have a question on 124,
All right, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask our building inspector.
No.
No?
All right, what's your question?
Okay. The projected plans for this, in order to come here, they had to be denied. As far as our zoning code that we put into place things like the lighting looms, the direction of the lighting, all of that, I assume, does that go with you or the planning board to make sure it's met?
That's gotta go through the planning board.
Okay, but that has to be based on the lighting laws that we just passed, right?
Yeah.
Based on the new
The
code.
current code.
Okay, and currently, do we have a code for operation of commercial buildings as to an hours that they can and cannot operate? I don't remember.
I believe there is hours of operation.
I know we have a code for construction, that they,
No, I
that
think
noises
there's
can.
hours of operation for that too.
Okay, so it wouldn't be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
I'd have to look up the code.
Okay. Again, just for clarification on this. Thank you.
You wanted to say something?
We wanted to do closing on
Yeah.
1:30.
On 130. So we're done with 124?
No, we're not done. They're all- everything's
Well, no,
together.
I meant,
It's one
you know,
big- It's one big.
We have to.
So let me make, and the comments that I'm gonna make on 130 are similar, okay? I mean, we've identified a lot of impacts. The people on State Street have identified a lot of impacts. We understand that. But again, none of these variances are creating any of those impacts. And any impacts on Stage Road can be fully studied by the planning board during their environmental review process, by the engineer, by the planner. If it's dangerous, if it's not safe, if the traffic report says it doesn't work, they're not going to approve us. We've got to prove to them, and we have to show to them that we can develop the property in a manner that's secure to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Otherwise, they're not going to approve it. But they're going to study these issues. They're the board to study these issues. Again, you've heard a lot of speculative comments about potential impacts to wetlands, to wells, from mosquitoes, impacts on the landscaping, the drainage, runoff.
Look at the application.
There's speculation. At the planning board, we have an engineer, we've got plans, we've got SWIPs, we've got all these studies that have to be done. And if there are impacts that can't be mitigated, it's not going to get approved. Okay? So let's talk about the impacts that of most concern to people from the variances. And again, it's the height, the lighting, the hours of operation, proposed noise. And these are all types of impacts that are not necessarily caused by the variances themselves. It's caused by the use of a property for a permitted use in the zone. So if we had enough land and we didn't need any variances, you would hear these same issues. And I'm not saying that they're not legitimate issues. All I'm saying is those are issues for the planning board to look at and impose appropriate conditions. And if it relates to a variance that your board has to grant, then your board can impose relevant conditions to buffer any potential impacts. And the applicant is willing to do whatever landscaping is necessary to lessen any potential impacts on the neighbors. And again, going through the factors of what has to be shown to grant the variances, and I'll go through them again. I don't think we have an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood because many other properties are similarly situated. Can we achieve it by some other feasible alternative? I mean, last time we showed you the map, we showed you what section or what portion of this property can be developed without any variances, and it was so small. In some places it was negative, in some places the envelope was maybe 10 feet by 5 feet. So without any variances, there's no feasible way to develop the property. Are the variances substantial? Again, some of them are, yes. But you have to look at that as a factor of the totality of the circumstances. This property is out for relief. It can't be developed without relief. And again, we're willing to accept appropriate conditions designed to lessen any potential impacts that may be created by the grant of the variances. And the self-created difficulty we've talked about. He had the plan to put all three together. And lastly, with regard to this project, the GML review. So the GML review did not disapprove this time. They made recommendations, and the first three recommendations of the letter was don't grant the variances. So that's not much of a recommendation. And again, that's not their job. as I pointed out, this is your job. You're entrusted by law to follow the criteria set down by statute and determine whether or not somebody's entitled to relief, not to rely upon the county planning board just writing a letter and saying, deny it. So I would ask you to override those recommendations by the planning board of the planning department of the county that recommend the variances be denied. The other variances we're willing to do. We'll agree to all those other conditions, but those items 1, 2, and 3 of their GML letter, we ask you to override.
I've got a question there. Are you?
I'm finished, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. On 130, am I right? I wasn't here last month. I looked at you. Entranceway to this parking lot
130.
is on State Street.
Yes, that's correct.
No, I'm asking where the entrance is.
Yes, the 24 parking lot, accessory parking lot will require access off Stage Street. But as Mr. Francesco pointed out, the variances relate to up top and the other side of the property where it abuts the Indian Rock project and up front by Route 59. The variance that we're seeking for the side yard where we want to put the building is 5 feet off. The property right next door to us is 5 feet off their property line. They've got the same variance. They have the same problem.
Can you point to something?
What would you like to see, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Turner.
So, let's look at the site plan.
Okay.
Makes us a lot better. So on the site plan, here's the parking lot on State Street. 24 spaces. But all our variances are up here. Buffer over here, side setback over here, a side setback over here, front setback and yards over there. So this parking lot is not creating the need for any variances.
I didn't say it was. I just have a concern over a parking lot that needs to be accessed.
Down State Street. And I agree, it's a legitimate concern, but it's something that the planning board will study and the planning board will take a look at. And, you know, if the planning board says, no, it doesn't work, it's not safe, the traffic report says it's not good, then we may have to lose that parking lot and we may have to redesign the project. But right now, it's all speculation as to whether it's going to work. A lot of the comments seem legitimate. I understand it's a narrow road. And if it doesn't work, we'll have to work something out with the planning board and either lose the parking lot or change things around. But we did meet with the CDRC on a couple of occasions before we went to the planning board with this plan. We tried to develop another plan that had the parking coming from Route 59 with a big turnaround, and it was too much disturbance of the wetlands. This was an alternative plan, and it's fluid. It could change. It could. I don't know what's going to happen when we get to the planning board with that.
I also get it. You know, you made a point that these residential homes are in a laboratory office zone. You know, we get it. There's still homes and there's still people and families.
And I understand.
You know, that
And I
also
understand.
weighs on judgments that, you know, we may make.
We're not saying that we're not willing to work with the board and accept conditions, and we're not saying that we're the bad guy and, you know, forget about these houses. And we understand that people live there, and we understand they're going to have some impacts, and we'll work with the planning board to come up with whatever plans we can to mitigate whatever impacts they're going to have. But without the variances, we can't get there. And the property is just going to sit empty. So, thank you.
Mr. Turco.
Yeah, I just would like to just mention one thing regarding that parking lot down there. It's there, the main reason why it's there, it's not gonna be something that is traveled all day long. Okay, the parking lot's sufficient based on the way the project's designed right now, coming from Route 59. That's where all the tenants are gonna park. This is gonna be overflow parking for employees when they get there at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and when they leave at 5 o'clock at night. And it's going to be permanent parking only. So it's not going to be a thoroughfare of parking. Now, I understand the road, I get it, okay? And we really don't even need the parking lot, okay? The reason why we have the parking lot is because in the event that we need extra parking, it's available for the employees so the cars aren't sitting in the parking lot, the main parking lot, all day long. So it's really an overflow employee parking lot for the employees that are coming and working there, and then at the end of the night, going home. That's the purpose of it.
Okay. The public hearing is closed, but I will, make one comment back there. Just state your name. And again, I'm being generous here. We did close the public hearing. So you can
Barbara
state-
Ruggiero.
Go ahead. You were already sworn in. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to tell you, I don't know what impact this will have, but I can, through my State Street house, I can actually see Lackawanna. So I don't know where this buildings are going. And when we first came here, they said they needed 87 parking spaces plus the, corner 26. They said it was gonna be three stories high. Now they've got it down, as I heard today, it's smaller, and they don't really need all this. So, what is the case? I can see right through to Lackawanna. So where is this building going?
Listen,
He addressed us. We should have something to say. He brought up my house, so I should have something to say about it.
hold on.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I'm gonna object. The public hearing was closed last month.
You
so-
can't bring up stuff about
I'm
us
not-
and have us not rebut it.
Hold it,
That's
please
not-
stop talking. I'll gavel you down. I don't have a gavel here. This is the
I'd
U.S.
like
Congress.
to speak with counsel outside, excuse me, just for a minute.
This board closed the public hearing. I know that there are still questions here, but procedurally, the public hearing is closed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I cannot receive any more.
There's something they gotta talk about.
Maybe we should take a 5-minute.
All right, we're gonna take a
Take a 5-minute break. The
7-minute
restrooms
break.
are way back if anyone needs it. There's water in the hallway if anyone needs it.
And I know we ran this before. That's why I know this. It creates you certain other variances.
Yes, I need copies of the ones that said
Without the other portion at all.
these. I need copies of every.
Okay, once you're over the 75.
You would have had to.
I know. Hopefully it's fixable, so you don't have to start all over
The one at 159.
I know. What parking lot is
Yes.
I have it. No, because I send it on the bottom here. That's what I send to the county. Those are all the back. I think it's 7.
It just pisses me off that they bring shit up
That's why I was going to say something.
I wanted to do a double track of sidewalk.
I think dual track
Look, I served on the.
No,
I don't
I
have
didn't do
anything.
it now, but I never saw building plan before this meeting.
In other words, a whole bunch
I know what
it would require a new referral.
What I'm saying is,
Is that same crew the whole time that they can't get their pool?
are we leaving?
They get things, same crew, they were coming to the planning board, and they're impossible. The lady, she will sometimes be the crazy project. She represents a couple of those crazy projects.
Oh, she's an engineer.
I know, she's representing this, like, 20 variance projects. She's doing those special.
I'm looking at the two of them. I don't know.
That's what she's doing there.
I know, she's an engineer. I can't see her. Oh, okay. That's what you were saying. Well, you gotta remember, she's an engineer. She defines the number of potential property with the building based on that's all I
It's like that other one, which is, that went on for like 6-7 months.
Well, they're trying to get a fire so they don't show up.
No, everybody has the right to show up. Everyone has the right to speak.
I'll stand out here and look at
Francois Mary Arouet. Voltaire. That's what he fought for in France before us. Well, that's what I taught today.
Well, you teach the same grade as Lou?
I teach I
Well, we can start out with one of those. Well, we have to talk.
Well, right now,
Right
now,
now,
let me ask.
I have it at home. I only have 4 hours. I would personally.
No, I'm more. I'm just corny. He's a negative 7. He has a negative 7. He can't build up. He's a landscaper. He should build a nice park for kids to play. So lot 1, start obviously, non-residential, yes.
I don't know if that's allowed. I don't think that's allowed.
What is that?
No, it's
I don't know, I'm just saying this every time.
I don't know if there is something in there that you can ask.
I don't know.
I came across that.
You have to do so.
Yes.
No, if you can approve it, that's like.
But you already overseen it. No? You said you could depart that. Well, you can say that. You can say that.
I said that last week. I said that the last time. Create a park. But then again, we have too many mosquitoes.
Oh, it comes up bad.
So,
Okay,
where do we open the
Meeting is hereby reopened and continued.
I would like to, in compliance with the open meetings law, disclose what was just spoken about amongst the building inspector, me, the attorney for the applicant, and the engineer for the applicant, This relates to 124, not 130. The building inspector has observed that a necessary variance was not applied for lot width. The code requirement is 200 feet minimum. Do we know how much? And they're providing 81. It was not in the application. It was not in the referral to Rockland County, and it is not shown on the site plan as well. The applicant's attorney, I don't want to speak for the applicant's attorney. I will recommend that you, Mr. Chairman, recognize the applicant's attorney for his comments on this issue.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
So, Mr. Chairman, when we were going through the CDRC and developing these plans, the interpretation that was provided, or the basis that we were going on, that this is an existing small non-conforming lot, and under your code section, when you have a non-conforming, existing non-conforming lot, the bulk requirements are different than they would be if it was a conforming lot. And based upon that, we took the position that 80 feet was adequate because under the code, all you needed to have was 75. And nobody ever commented, either the planner, the building inspector, the attorney, the engineer, that that was a misreading of the code. Okay? So we didn't ask for that relief because we didn't think we needed it. We thought we were entitled to build with 80 feet as of right under this non-conforming use code. So the building inspector has determined now that, I guess, our reading of the code is not proper, and that it was never picked up, and now he just realizes that we do need a variance for the lot width from 200 down to 80.
Mr. Brown, just for a point of information, in 2006 on your application, that was one of the variances that was granted to you.
Yeah, but the bulk requirements were different, and we had made this application at the time.
What bulk requirements changed?
I don't know. The bulk requirements were different if you look what they were back then and what they are now.
Not the required.
Well, back then it was 75 feet. Now you're saying it's 200 feet.
No, back then it was 200 feet, and
Well,
you applied for it.
If you go, if we go pull out the
Look at the resolution.
On the resolution of 200 feet.
In either event, it was section 210, 132, and it was the way I interpreted it. Says for all non-residential lots having less than 100 feet of lot width, the following minimum requirements shall apply. And it says under D,
I'm sorry, honey, you did that quickly. For all lots?
non-residential lots having less than 100 feet of lot width, which we do because we're at 80, the following minimum requirements shall apply. And there's like a couple of things, and one of them is the minimum lot width and lot frontage shall be 75 feet. So I was taking that to mean we needed to have at least 75 feet. We have 80. So now I'm learning that we would need to still have 200, not 75. So that, I just want everyone to know why I interpreted it the way I did. It was, you know, everyone, it goes to the building inspector. It's his call in the end of the day. But at least there was a reason.
No, I appreciate
So
that.
I'm not trying to, we weren't trying to like play any games or ignore it. This is where it came from.
That's
So,
the word,
in light of this new information, Mr. Chairman, we would request that our application be amended to request the relief for a lot width variance from 200 feet to the 80 feet that we're proposing. This was a variance that was previously granted by this board, and you know, it might even run with the land, but I don't know. But we would make that amendment. It's an existing condition.
Run with the land, Dan?
No.
No.
Is it appropriate to make that?
It expired
Village changed, its code about,
several times.
well, no, with regard to expiration of variances.
Oh, okay.
I think in, I don't know, throwing out a number, 2010, approximately. I don't have any objection about, obviously, having the application amended. I think that that would require a new public hearing because it wasn't listed in the public notice. It wasn't listed on the GML referral. It wasn't listed on the site plan.
So you're talking about republishing notice and conveying this information to the Rockland County Planning Board?
And all the other agencies now.
Correct.
Well, no,
But
the Rockland County Planning Board is the only one that needs a referral for this board. They've already disapproved it. So if you send it back to them, do you think that you're going to get an approval on it? So I think that's a huge waste of time, but
okay.
I understand the issue with regard to having to publish and renotice this to the public, but I guess if we have to do it, we have to do it. If
Let me
that's
also
the
point
determination
out-
by your village attorney.
Let me also point out that number 4 on the Rockland County GML dated August 29th, 2019, stated that the July 16th, 2019 narrative provided by the engineer indicates that a variance for the buffer to a residential zone is required, but is not indicated on the GML referral form or the site plan bulk table. In addition, the narrative does not include the proposed number of feet for the rear setback. The GML referral form states 0 feet rear setback is proposed, but the bulk table indicates that a 29-foot rear setback is proposed. Lastly, the GML referral form indicates that the proposed use is warehousing, office space, and accessory housing. The narrative site plan notes and parking calculation indicate that only warehousing is proposed. All materials must be consistent. All proposed uses and required variances must be clearly indicated. If any uses other than warehousing are proposed, the parking calculation must be amended to account for those rules. I don't think that's applicable on that part. The public hearing notice must be reviewed, and if it contains incomplete or inaccurate information, reissued. So I think this is more than just the additional variance. They're complaining about a number of inconsistencies.
Okay, however, I did an email and attached the corrected GML form. It was noticed correctly,
With the exception of this.
with the exception of this variance that you just brought up today. When I did the public hearing notice, I noticed that it was missing. Rachel wasn't out. I spoke to the other engineer. They contacted her on vacation. I hand wrote and made the change when I sent the updated GML form to correct that, and they have it for the record, and I have the email dated November 4th that I corrected it and sent it to them for the record. However, it doesn't have the new variance you just brought up. About
No,
the lot width.
and I understand that, but this is, you remember, this is a recommendation. It doesn't say they need to review it again. They're just saying you need to make sure that everything's consistent, and I believe what your clerk just pointed out is she corrected it, and we'll make the plans consistent.
But the public hearing notice and the newspaper article, everything was done correctly from the beginning.
Right.
Because I caught it in time.
So the only thing that could be a possible deficiency
I am
on.
satisfied with how number 4 was handled.
So the only thing we could be deficient on is with regard to the public notice not listing this specific variance as a requested variance. And I would
Just a
Go ahead.
small
Wait,
part of
wait,
it.
wait, let him,
No, it's,
no,
You
why? I
listed-
wanna let him finish what he was saying.
you list the minimum lot width variance.
You're not
on
listening,
130.
Lori, let him.
Yeah, but not 124.
please.
So,
Let
so
him
I would
finish what
submit
he
to
was
you
saying. Thank you.
that the public notice is designed to bring the public's attention that there's an application going on. And it certainly did that. And you certainly heard from a lot of neighbors, and I don't think you're gonna hear anything different if we renotice this and send out a new public hearing notice that now says we need a lot width variance. It's not gonna change anything. Nobody else is gonna come down and say, oh, gee, they need a lot width variance? I didn't care before, but now they need a lot width variance, I'm gonna go down there and complain.
All right.
I think
all
any
right.
comments that you've heard,
I got the
you've
point.
heard, and I don't think it's really gonna have an impact.
I got the point. I'm gonna ask, our attorney, I have to think about the protection of this village as an entity, and this village is just taxpayers, So, Dan, how should we proceed here? The complete protection and the integrity of, Village of Fairmont.
Well, I'll leave that up to the board, but I do want to point out that it sounds like what Mr. and by all means, correct me if you disagree. It sounds like Mr. Baum wants the board to act on the variances that were applied for, and would have to come back anyway, and I do believe it would have to be renoticed. I've heard some language thrown around about speculative with regard to the neighbors and their comments. I think speculative could also be attributed to his analysis that nobody is going to care.
Yeah, I got the right one.
I think that it isn't up to him to determine whether nobody is going to care or people who are against this are suddenly going to be in favor of it or will now be more against it is the issue. The issue is if you're applying for a variance, what is the or variances, what is the procedure that has to occur in order to have a board properly hear that application. So you can't just say on the night of a meeting, oh, we're amending our application and the fact that it wasn't contained on a public hearing notice shouldn't be relevant. It still has to be duly noticed, and ultimately a public hearing would have to occur on that variance.
Okay.
So I would have, I'll leave it to the board's discretion to determine the order of things, whether they want to consider the variances that were properly advertised with the understanding that the applicant would have to come back and it would have to be renoticed for the other variance.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm listening to my attorney.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut him off, but I'm going to make it simple.
But you just did cut him off.
I know that, and I
Why
didn't mean
you cut him
to,
off?
but
And you're cutting me off. I'm sorry. I'll let you speak as long as you want. I just want to have,
I'm going to agree with him, that's why. I was going to say that there's no sense distortion. My client, we agree to adjourn this, to renotice it, to come back next month with the renoticed public hearing, and to continue the public hearing next month with regard to 124. So that anybody that has any comments with regard to the variance in the lot width will have a fair and full opportunity to come down and address this board. So we're willing to do that.
All right, so for the record, I'm renoticing, republishing, redoing mailings. but I'm not doing anything else other than, I don't have to send out to the counties. That's my question and my concern.
I would, yes, you do have to send out to the county because this new variance will result in a change to the site plan.
That's what
And should be sent along with the additional variance notification to the county. So,
that being said.
that being said, we would not have enough time
Right, that's my point. That's why I'm bringing it up. To do it for
For-
January.
a 30-day period because we don't have anything to send out to the county.
And the next meeting's January 9th.
Oh, yeah, because we won't have the 30 days because it's ready to fall.
Maybe they'll respond in less than 30 days. No?
No.
Especially with the holidays.
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
lucky, it'd be a shot.
No, okay. We will agree that we will do that. We'll renotice it. We'll schedule it for your meeting in February. We'll republish. We'll send a new GML, and we'll come back in February for the continuation of the public hearing with regard to that other variance request in February.
I appreciate that, you know, and I was gonna actually demand that because, or ask the board to concur in the ultimate protection of all the, property owners in the village of Amherst. All of us. You know, for our protection.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, the January 9th would have been the next meeting and the submission would have been December 5th. So January 9th is the submission deadline date for the February 13th meeting. And just, I'll give you another date just to throw it out there. February 13th is the deadline for the March 12th meeting, just in case you need it.
What was the February meeting?
February 13th. And then the next meeting after that, the deadline's February 13th for the March 12th meeting. I just did this.
We have no objection. We'll do that for 124, but 130 is all proper, and if the board would like to deliberate and rule on 130, we would like to get a board's decision. If you want to adjourn your deliberations till next month, we will accept that too.
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead.
120 is an office building, is that correct?
124.
No, I know, but next to 124 is 120. Is that an office building?
Yes.
And then 126 is a residence.
Yes.
134 is an office building?
134 is an office building. That's Barry Sturch, yes.
And 144, do we know, is that an office building as well?
Yes, it is.
Dan, if you can answer my question, so this neighborhood here is a combination of office building and residential. Could a warehouse be considered out of character for the neighborhood?
I can't answer that question. That's a board's
Okay, but this could be a consideration as well.
Well, I'll answer it this way. The zoning code doesn't consider it to be out of character for the LO zone, and the zoning is LO. So the use is, and by the way, you know, obviously, building inspector, I defer to you. But if it's a permitted use in the LO zone, then I don't think that should be the issue.
It can't be a consideration. It can't be considered out of character.
I mean, intensity, there are other aspects that you can consider, but that would relate to the size of the structure or something like that. But in terms of the use, it goes by the zoning.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, folks, let me get your attention here. I'd like to get a sense of the board with regard to 130, 159. It's up to us to determine whether or not at this point we want to deliberate and render a decision, or consider other aspects of the application with respect to any notions regarding conditions. And I'd like to hear what the board members have to say about that. I don't want to dictate anything because I'm just one vote. So, any comment on that?
Come on, guys. Okay.
Anyone?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to make a decision here because we have
I
an
think-
audience here that's waiting with bated breath.
I think this board owes the audience and definitely the applicant discussion and where our thoughts are going and what we're looking at. I must say, of all the cases we've sat on since I've been sitting here, this is probably one of the most complicated. There appears to be certain applications in this variance that make a lot of sense because the property needs to be developed. And we can't change the size of the lot. It's there. There are certain parts of the application that seem to be taking a major benefit. And
Lori, can I ask you
Like
to
what?
move your mic closer to your mouth?
We'll turn it on top of it.
Even better.
I'm sorry.
Perfect, thank you.
I thought it was on. Okay, so my concerns go to, first of all, the amounts of variances are major. They're substantial. There's no discussion on that. Some of them are required for any usage, and no one should be denied the right to use their property. And that's why they come to the ZBA. The biggest concern from the community happens to be part of something that the zoning board cannot really deal with, because the parking area and the horror on the street and all of that is within guidelines, and no variances are being requested for us to vote yea or nay on. Just to clarify it for the residents, there is nothing on that section, which is why I asked the question. I've sat on this and I've worked on the plan, and I am not comfortable with removing buffers between residential homes and commercial. I have a big problem with that, and I, again, understand the difficulty of the lot, but the privacy and the sanctity of someone's home can't be thrown out for one benefit. There has to be some kind of equalization. I'm not an engineer and can't figure it out. There is no proper way to build this lot. You showed that very well. So we have to give some of the things necessary to do this without hopefully removing the privacy and the rights of the residents who have appeared more than any other group in the 5 years I've sat here continuously in the cold with the babies and without. So we do hear you, which is why we need some considerations. I did look very carefully, and this is what I've been staring at, the map that Paul gave us of variances granted last time. Okay, and of course the largest variance that was ever granted on that parcel was 1985 Town of Ramapo. It has nothing to do with this village. I am concerned about the GML, that we are overdeveloping, and yet we need to come to some kind of compromise to allow Mr. Turco to develop his land. Paul, I don't actually agree with you. This is self-created, because I'm a real estate broker, and I'm sorry that Mr. Turco was led to a bad place, but it was for growth of a property, and once that happened, everything is sat for 20 years, and he's paid taxes, and he's entitled to make some money, but I don't know if his entitlement overrides that of the communities. So I have a problem with actually voting. I'm gonna read through this for the fourth time. I have a shopping bag full of this project. It's above my purview, but I do think that whatever we do, we have to remember the community, and we need to have the buffers that we put in, whether it's on this lot or on the other lot, especially the other lot, which we're not discussing. We're in a neighboring village. The village of Montebello asked for a buffer between us. And when we take it away, we're also affecting what they've told their members in Montebello. Those are my comments at this point.
Thank you. Well, I sort of concur with,
Mike.
oh, I'm sorry.
I know.
I thought I was speaking loud. Not sorry. I concur with, virtually everything that Ms. DeFrancesco has just said, and also, concern, I hope I have the right property here, regarding, I mentioned before, State Street access to a parking lot, regardless of how many vehicles that it might hold. I have deep concern over that, and try to be empathetic as possible. If I lived on that street, you know, how would I feel about that? And again, I agree that property owner, you know, should be able to develop something on his property. And again, this has been a lot to digest, and I personally think I would like more time to consider these variance requests, and since we're going to be convening again in February, that might be the appropriate point to render, you know, deliberate and render decisions. Board? We're still talking, I'm just asking that, you know, we're just two people now.
Right. I've gone through all this stuff. I've gone out, visited the site. I've listened to all you out there. Listened to the builder as well here. One thing that got my attention was you kept saying it's permitted in the zone. I agree it's permitted in the zone. I just feel like the zone is too small where you're looking to build. I think you're trying to put 20 pounds into a 1 pound bag. And we can't control the parking lot on State Street, but if that was to come off of this, that's one thing that would probably help me a little bit. I've been down there. I cannot see using State Street for anything. It's not like somebody moves into a neighborhood by the airport or by the highway and now they're complaining about the noise. These residents are here. Now you're coming in. So they're voicing their opinion and they got some great points. We need the buffer zone, I agree with that once again. If you came back with a smaller project so you can build and appease everybody, that would be very helpful as well. You spent a lot of money on this. This is beautiful. But I just really feel like you're just overbuilding that piece of property you have there. I do understand it's a horrible lot. There's not much you can do with it, but I feel you're trying to put too much into it.
I'm just in the mind to,
Well, just for a thought,
not to
on the 130 application,
Yes.
just for consideration, I try to break down all of the variances, just again not to vote but to look at. The minimum lot width is what it is. We want 200 feet and they don't have it.
right.
Okay, so that's like one of those non-discussions. The front setback is one of them that I'd like us to look at and review before we vote. I understand, and I questioned at the time, existing non-conforming condition of the dilapidated building that's 7 feet from the road. I drive up and down, I live around the corner every day. I think that if we approve a plan, I think we should benefit for safety and everything else by looking at discussing a lesser variance so that we have the safety of not being on the street if we're looking at development. So that's what I'd like everyone else for us to review and think about. Side setback, they don't have much to start with. And as I said, I think the biggest issue that I see in this is that buffer. Parking in the side yard is something that is not permitted in residential. I didn't know it was not permitted in commercial. I gather I'm correct, it's not.
Yeah.
Perhaps looking at that with conditions of screening, whatever we need, might be a way to work within the parking spaces for the variances on the side yard.
Something to think about.
And if we can come together maybe with a decent package that won't kill Mr. Turco, may decrease his value, but any value is better than the one you've had for the last 22 years. And give him the... It's a hard thing to say, and I do want to make one comment to the family, comment that you wanted to make, sir. We understand that their house was in a zone that the village agreed at the time that the entire street was neighborhood residential, and the lot at the end of a residential street, even though it imposed on the LO zone as the lot you own, made sense, and they voted to approve it. When the present couple bought it, it was 10 years later, they probably had no idea about it.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't.
So I know that when you made the statement, I saw an angry dad. I just wanted to clarify, because I know you knew that too, so I wanted him to feel better. Nothing to do with anything of value other than that. And I thank you, that's all I've got, guys. There's
So it's
5 of you.
I'm getting the feeling that we might adjourn and continue the applications on both until February
13.
13th. Is
Does
that the
the,
sense?
I'm sorry. Does that mean the public hearing on 130 remains closed?
They're both closed. They're done.
But I'm saying, well, 124, if they're being reapplied, is that open to a public hearing?
Yes, there will be a new public hearing.
I stand corrected, yeah.
Suzanne, will it be on every issue, or can the application just be for the minimum lot width? Why does it have to reopen everything? So that we can keep it smart.
Well, if I have to resend for comments to all the county.
But do you have to send on all the items that we've already had comments on, or just the minimum lot width? I'm not, logically in my mind, all of these have been applied for, a public hearing has been held, all of these that have been joined with the GML.
I'll defer
The minimum
to
lot width
Dan.
hasn't. So that's almost like a separate variance. Dan?
There's nothing hard and fast on it. I'd say you have to open up the entire, public hearing.
As long as there's an understanding that by the applicant's counsel that this will not impact any time constraints that may apply to the village in terms of when they have to vote, and that if it does, that he consents to the adjournment of and won't raise that issue, I would have no objection to that.
We consent, we have no objection. I don't think there are any time limits that really would apply. If there are, we waive them. For the continuation of the public hearing with regard to 124.
All right, so it's not a continuation. We closed it. The board would have to receive a motion here to
Well, first thing is,
reopen the public hearing.
for the record,
Yeah, this is what I'm.
the applicant will amend their prior application to include the side yard setback, no,
No, the minimum lot.
minimum lot width.
Minimum lot width.
From 200 feet to 81 feet?
80.4.
80.4, whatever the actual is. And that, the site plan, be revised as well.
And it still goes to the, for GML and to all the county agencies.
Just, I think it's just GMO.
Just you.
All right.
So
What
with,
needs to, reopen
with
the
that,
public hearing?
the board should consider, accepting the, amendment to add the additional variance subject to, the receipt of the actual, amended application and amended site plan.
All right, I make a motion in those words, and I
I'll
need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carried.
All right, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
with your indulgence,
please.
you voted on it, right?
Excuse me?
Yes.
You voted, okay. With regard to 130, would the applicant have any interest in trying to develop a plan which addresses the concerns? The board has not made a determination, but somewhat addresses the concerns raised by the board members that you've heard tonight, and then appear at CDRC to discuss them.
I don't think we can make that determination tonight. I think that's something, just as the board wants to digest it, and before they deliberate, I think we might want to digest the board's comments and think of whether we want to come back with some sort of modified plan that the board might have in more favor.
It's up to the applicant.
The most important, I'd like to just say a couple of things. At the end of the day, it's nice to have some direction. So we can take it to the next step. I'm willing to do certain things, but it's a moving target right now. So if someone could, maybe if we could be clearer on what, I know we talked about certain things, but it was vague. Like, maybe we could be more clearer on what we need to do, that possibly, if I did any revisions, it would work. I don't even know what revisions to do.
I don't know. All I know is I, as one voting member, have a deep concern again, and I've been down that street several times, State Street. I have deep concern about it being an access and egress way for, vehicles that, in that parking lot down there. I have a problem.
So based on what I've heard so far, right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, you want to push the building back a little away from 59.
I heard from a number of members, correct me if I'm wrong, about reducing the incursion into the buffers.
Now, what does that really mean? Like, how would we be able to accomplish that, being that the property is so narrow? Like, what would we have to do?
Smaller warehouse.
Pardon me?
A smaller warehouse.
We have less parking. We
So
could
there's a
allow
building
not
that-
to be on top of the sideline as much where the properties are.
Well, let me just mention one thing. Let me finish my thoughts, because I'm open to working with State Street. Okay? I'll make that clear. I'm probably open to pushing the building back a little bit in the front of 59. But the biggest problem that I had, and I know that, you guys looked at this plan from an overutilization, but based on the plan and, and spending numerous, revisions with our engineer, if we push the building, the only reason why we have the building on the lot line is because the fire truck.
We're talking about 130.
130. The
We're talking
fire.
about 130. We're talking about this structure here, and we're talking about this buffer. It seems like it's a big concern.
I'm not sure where's Route 59.
Here's Route 59, here's State Street, here's the parking lot, here's Indian Rock, over here. So,
Lackawanna. Not Indian Rock, Lackawanna.
Lackawanna, yes.
Well,
Lackawanna.
it's
Are they
Indian
called
Rock
Indian Rock?
on the map. Lackawanna is the street.
yeah, okay. But we know, we're talking about the housing complex in
Yes.
Montebello, so that would be over here. So, this is where we're talking where the buffer would encroach. So the only way we can do something is to either, we can't shift this building over more, because that, we would either have to reduce this or shift this building over. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
So that we would create more of a buffer setback from,
It would be helpful.
and then this coming back.
Right.
Is there any consideration to not building that lower parking lot at all?
Is there any consideration? Well, listen, as Mr. Turco pointed out, it's going to be used for employees. It's going to be overflow. So here's the concern: if we don't have it, and these lots are now taken up, and visitors come, or deliveries come, then where are they going to park? They're going to park in the parking lines. They're going to park in front of the buildings. They're going to block in cars, which is something we're trying to avoid. We definitely don't want parking in fire lanes. We don't want this to get all clogged up with cars parked anywhere they can because there's no other spaces. So the idea was get the employees, let them park down here, and then there'd be spaces up here if they need be for visitors, for trucks, for whatever else, and they wouldn't clog up the interior by parking on the sides or in fire lanes or no parking zones while they do their deliveries and while they run in because there's no adequate parking. So we don't want to create a site that's going to be filled in. So that's why we felt, that's why the applicant felt, listen, let's have this overflow parking so that if that's the problem, then we tell these employees, hey, you guys can't park up here anymore. We'll park down on State Street.
I understand what you're saying. I think, though, the residents, their biggest issue is that parking lot.
I understand. I really do. And that's why I said, though, but again, none of our variances relate to that, and I realize that's going to be an issue, and that's going to be an issue before the planning board, and we'll work with the planning board, and we'll work with the engineers, and if it's not safe and they're not going to approve it, we're not going to have parking there. Okay? But
Go ahead, Mark.
All right. I'm not familiar with the requirements of how many parking spaces that the planning board are going to need in order for you to have your businesses. But I do think that if you're showing 6 businesses versus the 3 that you're anticipating makes the most sense.
You're confusing the application.
we're talking about 130.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
It's been a long day.
It's confusing.
I just would like to finish my thought.
Mr. Turtle.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So where we was at, talking about parking, which I know that this is irrelevant to this board, but for every cause there's an effect. So, believe it or not, we really did a lot of thought in designing this. It wasn't just designed from a residential standpoint and from a board standpoint. It looks like we tried to really build this thing and get as much as we can into the property. The only reason why we have the warehouses that are on the property line is because the fire truck is not going to be able to turn around, okay? If we make the buildings, if we do that. Now, the easy thing is, okay, well, let's just make the buildings 10 feet smaller. Then it becomes an issue from a real estate standpoint if someone's going to rent them or not. Because they're only 50 feet wide, or 60 feet, they're not very wide. So there's a cause and effect, so I started out to say that my understanding, based on the comments, that parking lots are concerned, okay? And again, if we eliminate that parking lot, okay, I just wanna make sure that if we get this approved, that the building, inspector is not gonna be angry at us if there's too much parking in the upper section, because we don't have enough extra parking. So like I said, there's a cause and effect, so what we wanna try to do right now is we gotta balance everything. We gotta balance the board's concerned, we have to balance the building inspector's concern, we have to make sure. So I'm willing to, amend things, but if I have a little bit more direction, then maybe it's a good idea to go to the CDRC meeting and just further discuss it. And then, because I am willing to make it work, but we just have to make sure, if we eliminate one thing, it's gonna affect another thing.
I got a question. Is there any way to access those, spots?
Down here?
Yeah.
I can answer that.
State Street?
It's a very steep grade.
Let me
From Route 59 through the property?
Yeah.
Is that impossible?
let
The
me,
change of elevation just didn't work. We tried
We
that
tried.
to begin with.
We tried. If you would have saw our original plan, it came down here, and we came down, and there was a huge cul-de-sac that came around for the turnaround, and it just did. You know what? The neighbors would have hated that worse, because we would have filled so much of that property and built retaining walls and brought it way up. It would have been worse. And the engineer at the planning board level said, nah, it's not going to work, and that's why we went back and we rethought it. And we have, that's why Mr. Turco referred to this as the upper lot, and this is the lower lot, because the elevation change between here and down here is, how many feet?
There's stairs that connect it. It's
Yeah.
not just the sidewalk. There's stairs. There is an elevation difference. There's limitations on how steep our road can be, where there's parking, where we have a warehouse in front of the warehouse. So all those factors contributed that you couldn't get from A to B on a road.
It's at least 16
and
feet.
improve that.
Changing grade,
16.
at least, yeah.
Well, we can help out that, I know, not as big problem.
All right, well, I guess the question. Well, nonetheless, I still have concern over the access. That's all, I don't need to state that again.
Mr. Turco, could you put a warehouse out there that can be accessed only from the upper level? And you don't have no parking down there, and you have the parking above.
The other part.
16 feet.
yeah, we listen, if that's what I'd like to be able to do is come up with concessions and deal everything in totality at one time and vote on it. So, we're gonna be able to accomplish this, and we're gonna be able to, satisfy the neighbors, because I do wanna satisfy the neighbors. I don't wanna put something there that's gonna be a problem, because I don't wanna be a bad neighbor. That's just not the way, we're not looking to go and be a bad neighbor. So, if we can come to a conclusion, and we can look at everything in totality, A, being the front setback, B, figuring out a way where we could come off the property line a couple more feet to take into consideration that overutilization. C, eliminating the lower parking, down below. And B, trying to make the buffer a little bit wider. And if that's gonna satisfy the board, and we're gonna be able to move to the next step, I'm open.
Well, you would want to present some information to the Community Design Review Committee?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, your client said that he thought it would be a good idea.
Maybe. Oh, maybe's a good answer. Maybe I accept maybe. Maybe's all right.
How about
It's better than no.
Depends all right too, maybe. All right.
Okay, so I guess we're adjourned till February 13th?
Well, wait, I have
Not yet.
Well, wait, I have a question before we do the formal adjournment. Since it's one item to amend for the GML, and one thing for them to look, and to your point, that they've already disapproved it anyway, if I got it quickly and overnighted it to him, like if I got it Monday, or tomorrow, or Monday,
Well, no,
I just didn't know if I could try to do it to get it on the agenda for January. That's all I was thinking.
That'd be helpful.
What's the day? January what?
January 9th. But you have to do the plan.
If we're only,
If it's just the
if
one,
it's only
it's
adding
one
that
item, I have enough time to
variance.
re-advertise and do the newspaper article. It's just one comment for from Rockland County Planning. And I could tell them I'm overnighting it and just letting them know ahead, you're getting it 3 weeks rather than 4. I'm willing to work with that, but I just didn't know how you all felt about that.
as you pointed out, it is the holidays coming up.
Okay.
I mean, what I would hate to do is notice it for January, bring everybody down here only to find that we don't have a GML review comment back, and then we have to adjourn it for February anyway.
Okay.
I don't want to waste everybody's time.
All right, so I'll leave it till February 13th.
And that'll give us an opportunity to think about our plans, think about modifications, and if necessary, go to the CDRC before the next meeting, so maybe we can come to you with a modified plan that's sort of been, reviewed by your professionals.
All right, for CDRC, Rachel, December 23rd is the deadline for January 14th. And January 23rd
Hold on, 23rd is the deadline.
for January 14th, CDRC.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That's not happening.
And then January 23rd is the deadline for February 11th.
Oh, so the CDRC would be 2 days before. That's good. That would work. That would work.
All right.
Is that enough time to look at a plan 2 days before?
Not for them.
They'll see it on the 13th.
Right.
They'll see it on the 13th. But it's enough time for us to make revisions to the plan and at least get it to the CDRC and take their input, because it's got to work from their standpoint. A plan that this board likes, if the planning consultant and the engineering consultant don't like it, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't help.
All right, board members, are we good here?
Yes, sir.
Good? I'm looking for a motion.
Do we have any new business?
Before you adjourn, I just want to thank the board for its time and its consideration of this very difficult application and allowing us to make this presentation and giving us your attention.
You are so very welcome, Mr. Downey.
Suzanne, do we have anything on for next month?
I have no new submissions.
I just wanted to put off to February, so we're off.
We want to come back in January.
That's fine.
Before we adjourn, I'm just going to allow one more comment, and right ahead. Just the enabling.
All I want to ask, maybe, is if any one of you that are on the panel here and up behind the board, including Mr. Turco, I know you've been on our street, but you're a lawyer and engineer as well. My
I've been on
request
the
is,
street.
I would ask for you
I've been on.
to come down our street and picture this. If people are coming out of the lot, and if you line up how many proposed people that would be in that lot coming out at closing time, if an ambulance or a fire truck had to come down my block. Sir, Mr. Chairman, both of my kids have had seizures and have had to been taken out by ambulance.
Sorry,
Deal with it, but my concern, especially since it's right across from where they want to put the entrance, is that although they could maybe get an emergency vehicle to turn around in their lot for them, but that would put all of us in jeopardy. Not to mention, because of the zoning, if something happened with a fire, we were all engulfed because of something happened in that lot, none of us would be able to rebuild. So it's just a concern like that. I just asked, well, hopefully we have all our carbon monoxide and our fire, whatever. I just asked all of you, if you guys haven't been down our street, that you come down through the street, and I welcome you to turn around in my driveway, but picture you're not allowed to. We had a garbage truck come down today and got almost stuck with the conditions just this morning because it was a new driver. Couldn't get up the block correctly and almost took out our neighbor's new wall.
Thank you.
Please come visit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Looking
your
for a
time.
motion
Thank you.
here.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time, have a happy holiday, everybody.
Nice to meet you, and, thank you very much.